4 or 5 houses, then there's a house that's been here for a long time. So part of it's luck of the draw. I mean, look at what's happening in California. I mean, I'm sure the same thing is happening. One neighbor's house burns to the ground and the next neighbor's fine.
You look at the McMansions that went up afterwards, and there's a lot of people kind of cursing, why didn't they take mine?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. In the beginning, you felt very bad for the people.
Well, and there was
saying
something, I'm not
2
gonna
years
say
later,
there was
not.
some things going on, but there was some things going on while
There
that was
was a lot
happening.
of emotion.
I'm not gonna say anything, like, I'm not incriminating anybody,
Yeah.
but there were some people that, you know, the house next door burned down, well,
Oh, no kidding.
so. I'm not gonna say that happened, there's no proof that happened, but we believe that
Yeah,
happened.
those cars are fire traps anyway.
I have a question about California
Sure.
though. The death surprised me. I don't have
Yes,
TV,
me too.
so all of a sudden I'm paying attention the last
26
couple
was
of
the
days.
last, right?
Yeah.
29.
29.
Yeah.
Was there no forewarning, or did people just not believe it's gonna happen to me because I'm in the middle of a development, or?
All of the above.
A lot of problem with California is if you've been in that area, the slopes are super steep. Canyons are 200, 500 yards apart, but the canyon's 500 feet deep. So they see it on the other side, they don't think anything about it, it's a mile away, I don't have to worry about it. But they're not thinking about how fast that fire's dropping and coming back up the other side. And once you catch the wind shear on the top, when it comes back out of a canyon, it's just gonna mow across everything. One of the things I saw was there was a couple that I think he was 100 and she was
Yes,
98.
I saw that too. 98, yeah.
So, I mean, you know, you look at things like that and they've lived there for that long. I mean, that could be one of those things where they're like, we're just gonna buck up and,
And a woman in a wheelchair
Yeah.
couldn't get out and that kind of thing.
yeah. And it's moving so fast. The wind's moving, it's a 50 mile an hour fire is blowing across the road. Once you cut off the exit or once you cut off the entry point, there's nothing you can do for those people back there. It's just gonna happen.
Well, that area has a lot of eucalyptus too, I think. And that loves to burn. Great firewood.
Back to this.
Sure.
Anybody forget where we were? So they went through a lot of testing. Part of it was Missoula. There were a lot of underwriters, laboratory. The Missoula project had a project leader, mechanical engineer, design specialist, and they were starting to check different types of material for these fire shelters. Employed a lot of outside people. Probably, I'm sure Los Alamos had some people that were working on something for this. They continue to grow and develop. So the project goals for the new shelters were to protection and radiant heat needed to be improved, and they needed protection from direct flame impingement. So if flames were hitting that shelter, they needed protection from that. Requirement of the occupant not exposed to dangerous toxic compounds, so they had to find something to hold that shelter together that wasn't going to kill you from hiding inside of it and breathing all those toxic
So
fumes
that
from the
mean people
glue.
were dying from that?
The assumption is,
Yeah.
kind of like asbestos
Yeah.
was the greatest thing in the world till 1972. And then, oh my goodness, it's toxic and we're all going to get cancer back.
It still might make sense for a shelter because you're not going to use it for years and years. You're going to use it for 2 or 3 minutes.
Right, and I kind of wonder, you know,
Yeah.
you saw in the video where they were burning the cloth right over, I kind of wonder if that didn't have some asbestos filament in there. I don't know if a lot of you know that asbestos is great. When it's filamented into material, it's a great fire buffer. It doesn't burn very well at all.
Merlin's cloak.
It'll give you cancer, save you from fire. So test development continues. I don't want to spend a lot of time with this because I know you guys want to go look at an engine and we'll talk about other things. Shelter design was a big thing too. Wanted to be small and compact, but yet still large enough to hold an air barrier between the person inside the shelter and the actual shelter
Now,
itself.
these are all individual shelters.
Yes.
Has there been any thought about having,
A
4
group
or
shelter?
5 or something, just to minimize the service area? Something like that?
I haven't heard anything
They all
about
cuddle
that.
together, but who cares, at this point?
Yeah.
You know.
The other problem with doing 4 or 5 people in a shelter is how are you going to maintain that edge and maintain that, one person freaks out and dives out of the thing, and if he rolls up and jumps up and drags it with you, and everybody's not prepared for that, then
That's what training's all about.
yeah. No, and that's true. And we do, and that's one of the biggest things about jumping in a fire shelter is waiting until you're told to get out of there, because I don't know if any of you have ever been under a tornado. Know what that sounds like? Do you remember what the Sargande fire sounded like? Were you here?
Yeah.
You know the sound of a fire? How it's
No.
loud, it's like a locomotive is about to just run you down.
Oh, a tornado, it's like in the basement, they go in the basement. I've
Yeah.
been there one time, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you hear that screaming loud noise, it's the same thing in a fire,
Really?
times 100.
Hmm.
Because all it is doing is just, it's wind blowing, pushing fire, disintegrating everything essentially in its path. It's a force. I've never deployed a shelter, so.
You
don't
have,
think
Is
I
that
will.
right?
No, I never have.
Well, we're about to.
We can.
Have good running shoes.
Well, and actually the problem too is I didn't wear my whites boots. The boots that we wear on a fire are all leather. They're a heavy duty boot. They cost, what, $4.50 a pop? They're expensive
Wow.
boots.
do
But they have a steel shank, a raised heel, so you can walk in dirt, a Vibram sole. They're expensive boots, so it's not like running in a shoe. It's like running in the heaviest work boot you have.
how much do they weigh?
I think I just looked and they're 4.8
Too
pounds.
much or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Heavy. Each of the pairs.
There's a huge thing going on right now. Anybody heard of Scarpa? Or La Sportiva?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're a boot maker.
right.
So a lot of the guys that are on fire lines now, they wear heavy duty, well, they make hiking boots too.
Yeah.
So Scarpa makes one called the Fuego. And it's a heavier duty boot, but it's also very light. It's 2.5 pounds lighter than the boots that I wear now, the whites boots.
Hmm.
So I've been kind of looking into there. I'm getting older, my joints are getting old. So hucking around 4.8 pounds of boots a day takes a toll on your joints. They've been studying it for a long time. But there's a regulation through NFPA that we have to wear those boots on a fire line. A lot of people are wearing them anyway on the fire line. We've noticed it a lot. But I've kind of been looking for different kind of boots and that kind of thing.
So, on a fire line, the ground is hot, right? Likely, could be.
Yeah.
And so you need a boot that has, very good thermal resistance.
Yeah, and that's the problem is like the whites boots, the sole is basically screwed into the bottom of the wooden shank.
Yeah.
And there's still shank through the middle of the boot.
Yeah.
So the Scarpa boots, they're just glued. And it's heat rated, I think, to 600 to 750, but if you step in a hole that's got ash and flame and heat in it, it's going to melt it right away. So it's just going to delaminate. Then you don't have a sole to your boot. You're out in the middle of nowhere. So that's one of the things they're working on.
Yeah, the Chinese, when they started the space program, were using wood for the heat shields.
Really?
And it worked. Wood is a good insulator, especially lightweight wood. And when you get a charm on it, it's even better.
Yeah. Well, Japanese have a design, don't
Put
they?
that in your boots.
Japanese does a home design with a wood that has char on it. It's interesting. Sorry, I've been working on my house. Here's the Storm King Mountain Technologies. This is kind of what they came up with. Rolled up underneath their packs. It was the same triangle shape. So this is all radiant heat testing. It's like throwing it in a furnace, essentially, and seeing what the radiant heat is. And this class could take up to 5 hours if we wanted it to. So I'm trying to zoom through it so we can talk about other things too. I know a lot of people are curious about what Los Alamos is doing, and we've been doing a lot in the last couple of years. So they continued testing through February of 2002. They selected a design. There's an outer layer and an inner layer. If you guys want to cut this one apart after we get it out, shake it out, and kind of look at it, we can do that as well. It's always better to teach with hands-on. I like hands-on stuff rather than going through this. So the new shelter is only a pound heavier than the old shelter. So it's not too bad. The other thing too, with the problem was with the whip. The way that we carry our shelters, and I'll kind of show it to you in my pack, is that everybody had to invest into this because when you changed from the thin one, I don't know where that one went.
Right here.
Oh, so you see how wide that one is and how wide this one is. So that also included everybody had to get new wildland packs. So all the crews had to spend, and wildland fire packs can run from $150 to $500, depending on which fire department wants to spend. So everybody had to invest in that. and then change that as well.
Gosh,
So-
isn't it worth it?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well,
You hope.
we'll kind of talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Some other things. So here's the internal temperature scales. So the rise in temperature was a lot faster in the old style fire shelters than the new one over time. So average 20 degrees.
Are you allowing 5 minutes to, and that's it, or might have to be there for quite a while?
You might have to be there for quite a
So
while.
it would equilibrate,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Let's say Los Alamos Canyon, down by the ice skate rink,
Yeah.
how thick that forest is.
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna take a while for fire to move through there. And you're gonna still, even if fire blows over you, you're still gonna have a lot of radiant heat that you need to protect yourself from before you get out of a shelter. Internal heat flux, kilowatts per meter,
Is that kilowatts per square meter, is
per
that?
square meter, yeah.
Wow.
That's a huge
So
difference.
solar influx at noon on the surface is 1 kilowatt per square meter. So you're right up there.
And you're going up to 4.
Yeah.
So these are the burners extinguished in 20 seconds. So in 20 seconds, look how hot it gets inside that fire shelter
Wow,
on the old style compared to the new style.
Yes.
wow.
Huge difference.
And what is the difference in the structure?
The old one was just like a single layer with a fiberglass bottom. The
Okay,
new one kind of has fiberglass in between 2 sheets.
2 sheets.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like the stuff you can get at Lowe's called Reflectix.
Is that the heat blanket?
Yeah, and it's used for insulation instead of fiberglass.
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
But I think it had, plastic bubbles, bubble wrap inside, so that wouldn't work for you.
No.
But if you make it out of something else, it might.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. There's a lot of things and there's a lot of people that have tried to do this.
Mhm.
One of the other things too is the way that they build these shelters. The first ones were about 6 feet. So they had to build a larger one. I'm 6'2". When I have my boots on, I'm about 6'4". So we needed larger shelter set. And I know some of you have seen the guys around that work for our fire department. We have some guys that are 6'5", 6'6",
Yeah.
pretty big
Sure.
guys. Plus we have the guys that like to work out all the time and are big. So it's hard to get them in a tiny little shelter. And then if they forget their shelter and the two of you are together,
Mhm.
I'm pretty thin, it'll lose a lot of space. One of the other problems too is the way that the shelter's open. You can kind of see there's just 2 pull tabs on the old style shelter. When you open it up, you kind of have to shake it out and hold it on the edge. On the top of this, you'll see that there's two handles on here. So when we bust this open, I'll show it to you. And the old style didn't have this.
So one of the tests then is how long does it take to put the sucker on?
Yeah, yeah, we have to do it in a minute.
A minute, is that enough?
We hope.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to get on in a minute. Some of us can do it in 30 seconds. So this is just kind of we were talking about the airspace in between you and the top of the shelter itself. That creates heat buffer zones between.
And it's narrower, it says on there, that it's narrower, but it
Narrow,
creates it
higher.
bigger, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of direct impingement tests. So 2006, the Little Venus shelter, they did deploy, but see how they're folded in the back of that?
Mm.
They were just folded a little bit different to see how they would work in the packs.
So what kind of insulation do you actually wear?
On ourselves,
Yeah. Is there anything?
we wear a substance called Nomex.
Okay.
So I have a Nomex shirt. I don't know if I have it in the truck or not. Nomex is kind of like asbestos.
Foam-
Let's just compare it to
foam-
asbestos.
Foam or rubber or something?
No, not at all. It's just a thread
Oh,
that's heat resistant and fire retardant. It's not fireproof at all. They'll burn just like anything else. I've actually caught one on fire.
Oh.
Not gonna say what I was doing.
Or the barbecue?
No, we do backfires, as you all know. So we carry around torches.
Okay.
So I kind of slung some on my arm and I swung.
I've never-
You got to check. I mean,
Yeah.
I want to know if it burns.
You want a firefighter to break anything, just call me.
Yeah. That is true. We can. We can break a piece of concrete. All right, we're at the end. So we still have an interagency fire task group that they review all the time about what we're doing, whether we're doing right or wrong. This I kind of pulled up. I don't know. There it is. Can you guys still see that?
Sort of. But the iteration-
So these are fire shelter deployment statistics. since this goes from 05 to 16. So you can kind of see at the top how many shelters were deployed on the incident. Whether it was precautionary, which means that essentially we feel like the fire is going to come this way, and we're just going to make sure we protect ourselves from radiant heat.
So three
burns.
means 3 people or three groups of people?
3 people,
3 people.
three individuals.
Quiet.
But it was a burn injury prevention, so they somewhere in there got radiant heat directly upon them. We'll go down a little bit to
72.
yeah.
Wow.
Fire picked up and ran. Weather changed the direction of the fire, burned into a base camp. But if you'll also look at this number here, burn
Burn
injury
injuries
prevented 72 with
Yep.
0 fatalities at the end. Good thing.
There's the Yarnell, look at
And
that.
it sure stands out, doesn't it?
Look
Yeah,
at that.
Which one?
The Yarnell fire, 1919. So wait a minute, above there was someone in it prevented fire, that
Where are you looking at?
fatality one, where it, like all the way along, it was precautionary, it
Mhm.
prevented it, but in the end, the person
So the
died.
fire didn't work.
Well, it's one of the few fatalities of
Yeah,
above
yeah.
29.
Yeah, okay, that's the one that didn't work.
Wow. But
Um,
mostly it works.
Yeah, mostly worked.
so the King Fire under 2014,
Mm-hmm.
that was essentially a California inmate crew. They got caught on a canyon, got caught on the top of one of the canyons. Fire came in and kind of whipped around, and they deployed. We haven't had any fatalities since Yarnell. We've had a
Wow.
few injuries here and there, but I mean, if you look at how
That's
many
nationally.
deployments,
It's saved about
Yeah.
over 80%.
yeah.
Yeah,
So now you figure there's been 166 deployments, 21 fatalities. It's pretty good, but is it
Yeah.
worth the risk of, we need to come up with something better that's more foolproof.
Hard problems.
Let's see what else I got here. Oh, this is the King Fire because I had to catch up on my studies too. So this is where it burned over on them.
Wow.
And then the South Canyon Fire, this is the one that's in this is the one that's in, what did I say? Glenwood Springs. So there's Main Ridge. Can you imagine having a pack on and having your boots on and having to run up that hill to drop over the other side to survive? That's it's a sad statistic that we look at when that happens. But if you look at here, there's this monument, and if you follow this trail up and around, you can see where everybody is. For me, it was pretty, heart-wrenching to see that, because some of them were right on the cusp of breaking over. Some of them survived, and some of them were just right there before the fire overran them. It's kind of heart-wrenching. Do you guys have any questions? It's kind of a brief description of fire shelters. Sorry
Wow.
it took so long.
Is the lab doing any work here on this?
No, we're not.
What?
NASA's doing that.
Yeah.
Back into the Australia thing. Let's talk about
Oh,
Australia
yeah.
real quick. Australia came up with the fire shelter in 1958. It was their idea. It was this weird deal. I saw a couple pictures of it, but it was like a tent that you put on your head and drop down around you like a teepee, more or less. So it was kind of weird. So I got interested and wanted to research Australia. Well, Australia doesn't even issue fire shelters anymore. So what they do is they have enough flat land, and they figure that their guys are close enough to the truck that their truck is their safe haven. So they have this system in their trucks called a halo system that pretty much puts out a water spray or foam or a protection system. So the guys get in the truck, and on the trucks and the windows, 2 side windows, 4 side windows, whatever it is, and over the windshield, they drop essentially like a fire shelter. And then they're in the truck and they pull a fire blanket over the top of them. And then a lot of the concern that they have is rollover, because they have a lot of goalies and things like that. So they have big roll bars inside the truck. And the article that I read about it said that they've been trying to talk to the National Forest Service here for a long time about firefighter safety, because we do have a lot of rollovers, and there's a lot of fatalities that are rollover fatalities. You figure, say you drive the road at the ski area, if you get off just a little bit, imagine how fast that's gonna
Sure.
roll, and that's a lot of areas where fires are. We have steep roads, driving in dusty conditions where we can't see 20 feet in front of us, and you drive off the road just enough and you're just gonna flip the truck. So that's a big concern too. So speaking of the lab, one of the things that I brought up to our battalion chief was, hey, maybe we could spec a truck, kind of throw in some Australia things to this, and see if the lab would support it for us, and maybe the Forest Service could come look at ours and we could do a demo, but I don't know where that's gonna go. It's very beginning. And of course it's me saying, hey, we should try this, but
I mean, so they moved away from the shelters, they use their trucks as the shelters, and is that successful?
yeah. Let me see if I can find that video real quick.
The lake is
What's the
in-
data?